Good afternoon. It's April 7th. This is to my liberal friends, and I'm a little late getting this done today because I had to play in a golf tournament here at the club I belong to. So is Joe Biden responsible for anything? It's beginning to look like he likes to find a scapegoat for anything that might bring criticism to his administration. Apparently he never heard of former President Harry Truman, who famously said, quote, "The buck stops here," end quote. Biden seems to prefer the Muhammad Ali approach of a rope-a-dope when it comes to taking responsibility. Joe Biden made the decision to pull out of Afghanistan, and first he failed to alert our allies, and in the end it proved to be a disaster, and it cost the lives of 13 men and women serving in the military. But if you listen to Joe Biden and the report that he had drafted, it was just issued on the Afghan withdrawal, said it all went fine, and any problems that occurred with the withdrawal were the fault of Donald Trump. Now, as far as I know it was Biden that determined the withdrawal would come from the airport in Kabul and not the heavily defended military air base at Bagram. And guess what? Even the media that has fawned over him for the past 2 years plus, they're a bit irritated with this report, and it was dropped on them with only a few minutes before John Kirby was at the podium. And then they find that Biden will not be answering questions and was instead hopping on a helicopter and going to Camp David for a little rest and relaxation. Look, Joe Biden's been in politics for over 50 years, and if you followed his career, you know that he has difficulty with the truth on multiple issues. We can start with him telling everyone that he was on full scholarship for law school at Syracuse University. We later found out that not only was he not on scholarship, he was nowhere near the top of his class. And I should point out that the law school at Syracuse University is what's known as a Tier 4 school. For those of you who don't understand this, that's a bottom rung of law schools. Of course, he also told us that he played football at the University of Delaware, and that turned out to be false as well. And of course, we cannot forget him plagiarizing Neil Kinnock, the Irish politician, in a speech which forced Biden to withdraw from a run for the president earlier in his career. I think we all now understand that an aging Joe Biden has difficulty remembering what is fact and what is fantasy of his imagination. But during his entire career, he has made up stories in an attempt to make himself look better or to connect with an audience that he is speaking to at the time. But when it comes to time to take some responsibility for things that have gone wrong, Joe Biden is nowhere to be found. Remember, gas prices went up, not because of Joe Biden, but because of Putin's invasion in Ukraine. Biden seemed to forget, or at least nobody told him, that those prices had already risen before the invasion. Then he blamed the oil companies for raising the prices and eventually blamed the small gas station owners for raising their prices. Nobody seemed to tell him that the price of oil had gone up, and that dictates the price of gasoline. Inflation was not the fault of Joe Biden, it was the fault of Donald Trump. According to Joe Biden, inflation was already there when he took office. I wish somebody in the White House would tell President Biden that inflation was just under 2% when he took office, so something in his policies had to be one of the major causes. Here's an exchange with a reporter on that question. The reporter asked Biden if he took any responsibility for the rising inflation. Biden, quote, "Do I take any blame for inflation? No." That's what he told reporters. Quote, "Why not?" Biden was asked in return. Quote, "Because it was already here when I got here, man. Remember what the economy was like when I got here? Jobs were hemorrhaging, inflation was rising. We weren't manufacturing a damn thing here. We were in real economic difficulty. That's why I don't," end quote. Come on, Joe. Take some responsibility. Man up. And once again, his staff failed to tell him that jobs were being lost due to the pandemic and inflation was not on the rise. But when those jobs started coming back as the pandemic eased, Joe Biden could not get to the podium to take credit fast enough. Then you have to look at the crisis on the southern border. Excuse me, I know we're not allowed to call it a crisis. We are in the midst of an unprecedented surge in illegal border crossings. There have been millions of encounters on the southern border between the Homeland Security and illegal immigrants. The only effective means of controlling this massive influx had been the Trump-era public health policy known as Title 42. That policy allowed the Department of Homeland Security to expel migrants during the pandemic. But Biden, in his wisdom, decided to lift Title 42. Once again, that opened the floodgates, further exacerbating a crisis that we are ill-equipped to handle at this time. But Joe Biden found a way to blame Donald Trump for the mess at the border. According to Biden and his Homeland Secretary, Alexander Mayorkas, they inherited a broken and dismantled immigration system that was all caused by Donald Trump and his policies. The truth is, Mayorkas inherited a fairly secure border, and he and Joe Biden proceeded to oversee the dismantling and destabilizing of efforts made by the Trump administration that were actually stemming the tide of illegal aliens flowing into our country. If you interview immigrants crossing the border, they continue to say that they believe they were told it was okay to come by President Biden. The point is that Joe Biden hides from the press, sends out his minions to interact with the media, and refuses to acknowledge that he has done anything wrong. I suspect the American people will finally figure out that he's not a true leader, and he's not really in control. But perhaps he can ask Angelo, the Amtrak conductor, what to do. That might be difficult since he's passed away, but Joe won't know that. It's been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening. If you like the podcast, hit the subscribe button and recommend it to your friends.